everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are pitting two Oklahoma City podcasts against each other in the arena of podcasting to fight to the death about Ridley Scott's new movie. That's right, we're reviewing Gladiator II, Gladiator Dos, Gladiator Ni for Japanese people. We're going to start with an icebreaker question. We're also going to have a very short discussion regarding the original Gladiator because, hey, that movie's 24 years old. God, it cries. Before we jump into a spoiler-free review of Gladiator II, where we'll render a verdict, and then we'll conclude the show with an in-depth spoiler discussion. Joining me today, he is not Shadows and Dust. He is my co-host and an award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker, Laron Chapman. Laron, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for bringing me into the ring. I guess it's not the ring. Bringing me into the Coliseum with you. We'll fight.
We'll fight to the death.
We'll fight sharks together.
Fight sharks.
CGI sharks.
CGI sharks. CGI rhinoes. CGI. What else was it? Monkey.
Monkeys, CGI monkey baboons. Were they? I don't know what.
I thought for a second, am I in Wicked? On accident?
Truly is. There's a crossover. There's a crossover. Yeah.
Well, Laron, always good to talk with you, especially about, a follow-up to such an iconic film of Gladiator. Hey, we couldn't do it alone, though. We are so thrilled to be welcoming another Oklahoma City podcast, two dudes and a movie. Now, I'm going to throw this out here because one of the dudes you already know. You already know the dude.
The dude.
Or one half of the dude, I should say. She, formerly of Geek Girl Features, also current treasurer of the Oklahoma Film Critics Circle, and co-host of Two Dudes in a Movie, Chelsea Ratterman. Chelsea, welcome back.
Hello, thanks for having me. Thanks for having us. We're here.
Yes, we are.
The new voice, first time on the Cinematic Schematic, the other dude from Two Dudes in a Movie, Luke Parish. Luke, first time. Welcome to the table, sir.
Hey, it's so good to be here. I'm glad we can finally squash this beef that's been brewing between these rival movie podcasts.
I'm pretty sure it's one-sided on our end.
Their beef. Oh, no, they hate us? Laron, I think they might hate us.
I think they do.
Oh, no. I was joking about gladiatorial combat, but I guess we're going to have to squash this in the frib.
No, there's a lot of times I was like, yeah, man, I don't know. It's like, because on our podcast, I'll make like jokingly like beef like comments and stuff. I was like, yeah, no.
those Cinematropolis bros.
Yeah.
Those guys.
I'll always be like, check them out, but not really.
They suck, actually. And so another fun connection, I think former guest host on this show, Harold Story, I think has been on your show a few times and did some art, graphic design for that at some point.
Tunes. My boy Harold Story. He's been on our podcast a few times. He always makes the brackets for us. And those
so good at the brackets.
I know. Those were always like some of our more popular episodes where we did the Brad Kit, and it was like all the Brad Pitt movies, and then we did superheroes and all that other stuff. But no, we've been a guest on his. He's been a guest on ours, and he's done our logo. He's always in here for the creative stuff. I'll hit him up, and I'm like, you're doing it for free, right? He's like, no. All right.
Okay, that's my beef. That Harold, they've got Harold.
Yes.
That's a pretty powerful weapon right there.
This isn't getting better. I don't think this is getting better.
I think I'm digging a hole for us, actually. But no, so happy to finally have a crossover podcast. This is going to be super fun. What better crossover than, gladiatorial death matches? So listeners, before we get into today's review, don't review Two Dudes in a Movie podcast. You need to go review a Cinematic Schematic podcast for podcast apps. Or you could, give us both ratings on Apple, Spotify, all the goods. We're all about collaboration here. It'll just cost you a hand.
Or two.
Support the show. Help us discover more listeners like you. I'd love to end the year strong with some new reviews I could shout out to kick us off in 2025. Speaking of 2025, we've got a quick programming announcement. So originally we were supposed to be a bi-weekly show that we've sort of slowly turned into a roughly 3 shows a month show, which is great. We get to cover more stuff. With that said, I wanted to note exactly how December is going to look into January. So Gladiator II is one half of the air quotes Glicked double feature. That is the Gladiator and Wicked movies, both opening at Thanksgiving. And I've been pretty hesitant to embrace that because I was pretty skeptical that either of these movies were going to be hits. But looking at the box office tracking so far, it's looking pretty good for both movies. Much like Barbie and Oppenheimer, Wicked is definitely grossing a lot more than Gladiator 2, but I do think Gladiator 2 is getting some strong tailwind there. So yes, we are going to call this the air quotes Glicked coverage. So we're reviewing Gladiator 2 today,
And I'm glad that people have finally come together and decided that Glickit is the proper merging, because we had so many other
Glada
versions.
Wicked. It
I
was
like, I'm not
oh
saying
my
that.
gosh.
Wikiator.
I was like, I'm not saying any of that.
No.
I always read it as Glicked for some reason. I know it's Glickit, but I'm like, what's Glick?
Well, we know what's on your mind.
I mean, it does. It does look like Glick, to be fair, when you read it on the page. So next Wednesday, December 4th, we'll be reviewing Wicked. And 2 weeks after that, Wednesday, December 18th, we're going to be reviewing 2 movies in one. We're going to be getting the animated features for the fall out of the way here. We're going to be reviewing Moana 2 and Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. I've struggled mightily with programming what to put in this slot, because there's a lot of movies that I'm personally interested in that I'm not confident anyone's going to see. Y2K was one I kept coming back to. I'm excited for it, but the box office tracking for that is in the toilet. No one's talking about it. So I settled on Moana 2 also looks to be a massive hit at the Thanksgiving holiday. Actually, if you're listening to this podcast, it opened today. And I think it's actually going to be a monster that likely is going to carry through Christmas. So we're going to review that. And also just because Lord of the Rings and Christmas time kind of go together.
Absolutely.
We're going to do that. Unfortunately, Laron he's like busy, making movies this time around. So he will not be joining us for this one, unfortunately. Laron, I'm going to miss you on the War for the Rohirrim, man. I mean,
I will miss you dearly when I'm on set for 13 hours in the cold.
Oh gosh.
On,
he's going to be living the
I could be
real
cozy in that tiny room having good conversations with you, but I will be getting screamed at in my ear on the radio for why my actors are not on set yet.
The movies, though.
Yes, the movies.
Yeah, putting in the work. And then the following week, I'm optimistically aiming for December 31st. Could be Wednesday, January 1st. We're going to close out 2024 with our review of Nosferatu. Highly, highly anticipated on this podcast. We've been talking about it for months. I mean, it's between that and the Bob Dylan movie, and I don't think it's a contest, really. That is December, and then we're going to cap off our 2024 season of the podcast, I'm calling it, with a 2025 sneak peek the week of January 8th. And then finally, our top 5 movies of 2024 on Wednesday, January 15th, before we go on a really short hiatus, probably until mid-February. I guess there's some Captain America movie coming out that people are going to insist we talk about. Feel threatened by the masses. I have to talk about Harrison Ford as the Red Hulk. All right, with all that said, though, enough housekeeping. Let's get to our icebreaker question for the week. So, icebreaker question number 1. We're going to pit 2 fictional screen characters against each other in the Roman Colosseum. They could be from any time period at any point in time, okay? Who are the 2 characters, and what is their intrinsic motive for fighting in the Colosseum? So if we're going to provide an example from the first movie, Maximus fought enemies in the Colosseum for both revenge and Marcus Aurelius' dream. Now, he didn't really fight anyone else of note, so the one difference there is you're going to add another person. They're fighting another character, but who are they? Why are they fighting? Laron, Chapman, kick us off.
So I agonized over this question because there's so many cool assassins in movies. And so I had to pick the right combination, the right ratio of assassin, because I didn't want one to be fantastical and the other one to be like someone who fights on the ground in a normal film. And the ones I came up with were, so I have John Wick going against Beatrix Kiddo for the bride from Kill Bill.
That's quite a combination there.
I figured because they're both really good with swords. You know what I mean? Like they're both assassins. They're both really, they know how to. She fought, what was the Crazy 88? Was that the name in the first volume 1?
I think so, yeah.
And he went up the stairs 14 times, with multiple people. So they're used to, they have stamina. You know what I mean? Both of them.
Lots of stamina. Unbelievable stamina.
And they will keep going. I struggled with a motive. So the one I came up with was just essentially that the brides, because at the end of volume 2, her daughter gets kidnapped. So someone has kidnapped her daughter, and in order to get her back, she has to outmatch, John Wick and his motive. Because if you know what happens at the end of chapter 4, I won't spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but he at the gates of hell, he's giving a choice to come back and be back into the human realm. So in that space, if he outmatches her, he can come back and live out his life in solace, not fighting anymore.
John Wick 5, John Wick fighting at the gates of hell could be pretty cool, actually. Okay.
You have one more person to fight. I know you just did this entire thing, but we have one more person for you
We're going
in
to
a
the
Coliseum.
So similarly, I'm going to throw one. I've got a couple, so I'll throw one at you. Since you said John Wick, I just want to get this off my chest. I have John Wick fighting Jack Reacher as played by Tom Cruise. Okay, so why? Because Jack Reacher on a mission runs over John Wick's dog. Okay, and you don't mess with John Wick's dog. You just don't do it. So John Wick is also fighting for vengeance for the dog, and maybe Jack Reacher should just be more aware of the animals on the street when he runs them over in that red car from the second movie. I'm throwing that one out there as a John Wick alternative. And I should say this is all, they were both trying to fight the high table. That they're both of their, so that's how it fits into the interconnected John Wick, Jack Reacher cinematic universe. Chelsea Ratterman, what is your pick here?
Oh, okay. So I went back and forth on this one, and I have a serious one and like a fun one, just because. Yeah, but because we watched Gladiator, we watched Gladiator II, and we have a little bit of a now versus then sort of situation, and I keep trying to get Luke to like do this setup for actual movies, but Trump v. Reagan.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Get them in.
I'd pay money for that.
Country, like let's do it. Yeah, so that's.
And then just stick the tigers on both of them.
Oh my gosh, please,
sorry.
and everybody's leave.
Oh yeah, so because obviously we'll talk about it, but so much of that you can see the connections there. Then we'll talk about it later. But my other one was because we have Nosferatu coming up, trying to save the vampire genre. We're gonna have like Dracula v. Edward Cullen, and he's obviously we're killing Glitter dude.
Yeah, Glitter dudes are dead.
Yes,
what?
we are saving the vampire genre from the glitter vampires
because it's inevitable. We're in the early aughts reboot area.
The vegan vampires.
The glitter dudes are where it's at.
No, we have Eggers is going to come in. We're going to save the vampire genre, reset it.
Vampires are scary, guys. Remember that?
They are.
Yeah, that's true.
Unless you're Gerard Butler in Dracula 2000, and we can do that setup.
We can do that.
I can live with Dracula 2000 and Dracula 3000.
You just aged us so bad.
Remember?
Yes. No, I don't.
2000s. I'm all about death to sparkling vampires, and Nosferatu is here to do it. Luke, what is your selection here?
So mine, I originally was going to go a John Wick as well. I was going to do John Wick versus like Caesar from the Planet of the Apes movies.
Ooh.
And I just couldn't come up with why they were there. I'm like, maybe he was a monkey in the thing, and then John Wick's there. But what I ended up coming with...
John Wick as a monkey.
Yeah. John Wick monkey versus Caesar. Yeah, that's what I want to see. But no, so mine's, I guess it's a pairing. So this is more of a science fiction battle within the Coliseum, but it is Doc Brown and Marty versus Bill and Ted.
Okay.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
Doc Brown and Marty are there because Bill and Ted, they in my head canon, they all live within the same universe, and so they have just messed with time too much and things. And then Doc Brown and Marty know what it's like to mess with stuff and the fallout that can take place from that. So they're there to stop them and put an end to this tomfoolery that they've been up to.
Yep.
Your kids, man, we gotta do something about your kids. We saw that Bill and Ted's third threequel, whenever it's
Yeah.
right. It's pretty messed up. That's an incredible pick. I
Thank
mean,
you.
Yeah.
dueling time travel machines. You got the phone booth, and then you've got the car.
Uh-huh.
And at some point, Rick and Morty could show up too.
Yeah, I know. It could be
The
a whole
doctor
like
could
battle
just show
royale.
and just clean it all up.
Oh, inspired picks. Mine was actually super boring. It also involved Edward Cullen, but it was just Edward Cullen versus Blade, which is a classic internet fight.
That is
because except for I want this to be Mahershala Ali's Blade this time because I just want Mahershala Ali to play Blade.
Maybe in 20 years.
I don't understand why it's so hard. Laron and I have this conversation all the time. We're like, they made 3 Blade movies before there was a studio that had this much resources.
Yeah.
And they can't pull it off.
I don't know what it is. Like, are they trying to tie it into like the current Marvel canon? Like, it doesn't even need to do that.
No,
Just be a
make it
Blade
its own
movie.
thing. Make it its own thing. If you can't figure it out, that's fine. Just make it its own thing, and maybe one day you figure it out. But just make a good Blade movie.
Yes.
Well, I mean, they set it up. Like we heard his voice. We set up. I forget the group in
Jon Snow.
in the Marvel comics. That's like the supernatural or
Oh, yeah.
whatever. Like they were setting that up with Eternals, and then we just. I mean, I guess because we're basically ignoring Eternal.
Is it Midnight
Eternals.
Suns?
Huh?
Is it Midnight Suns? Is that the group they're part of?
Sounds right.
I don't remember.
I'm gonna say yeah. No, that's
Yeah,
factual.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
one of those.
Someone will correct
it's
us
one
in
of
the
those.
Put it on the Wikipedia.
I think it was Midnight Suns, and I think Ghost Rider is also a member of that. Oh, the crossover. We get Mahershala Ali's Blade, and then we still bring Nick Cage as Ghost Rider back.
He would do it.
Oh my
but now he's
gosh.
Spider-Man Noir, so
I mean, who says he has to do one or the other? I mean,
It's
I
a
don't.
body
I mean,
double.
at this point, everybody's hopping around.
just
So
Nicolas Cage, the MCU occasionally keeps things that are like they kept the Daredevil characters for the show
Yep.
with their version. So let's just continue that trend of like, well, people like Nick Cage as Ghost Rider, right?
Let's go.
All right. So listeners, what are your picks? You can hit us up on social media on Facebook.com / the Cinematropolis or on Instagram at the Cinematrop. Haven't done it yet. By the end of the year, I promise you we will have our blue sky set up because X is dead. And we no longer will post there to give some dude our content that he can study with his AI to hyper target you. Anyway, so you can also email us at thecinemetropolis@gmail.com. All right, so let's talk about Gladiator 1. Talk about aging us, Laron. Remember Dracula 2000? You remember Gladiator 2000?
Right.
The one Gladiator was in 2000, released May 5th. 24 years ago?
Wasn't even born yet.
Oh my god.
Wait, really?
I'm kidding.
Oh my god! I was like, I don't know you that well. You look older than that. But...
That's the thing. You can't. That happens now. It's like I made a reference to a Step Brothers the other day in a class I was speaking at, and all the kids looked at me like, "What?" I was just like, "Oh no,
You're no, I'm the olds now."
Oh, no.
Oh no, it's really bad when you're like, clearly it's a pop culture reference. Everyone knows, and then the kids are like, "Who's that?" And you're like, "What?"
It's a pop culture reference that's so aged now that even now it's phased out. I was just on set for 2 days with kids teaching them how to make a short film, and I mentioned The Breakfast Club because the script they were about to direct was loosely based on it, inspired by it. No one knew what that was, and I was like, I guess that makes sense because it was the 80s, so it's technically old even for us.
Yeah.
But I just felt like it was canon. It's just in the world, it's in the zeit, and the people know what it is. They don't know what it is.
We have become our parents. Yes. Okay. Anyway, back to Gladiator. It was budgeted at $100 million in the year 2000, which is actually pretty significant, pretty costly, and it grossed $465.5 million worldwide, which is a pretty big hit back in the day. It was also not just a commercial hit; it was critically acclaimed and respected by the Academy. It was actually nominated for 13 Oscars and won 5 at the 73rd Academy Awards. Don't ask what number we're on now. It won the awards for Best Picture, Best Actor for Russell Crowe, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound, and Best Costume Design. I learned the other day that Russell Crowe, and I didn't realize this again, so old, he was up against Tom Hanks in Castaway and won.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, I love Russell Crowe in Gladiator, but like that's like an all-time. I mean, Tom Hanks, that was his movie.
Yeah.
Robbery. Even though I'm pro Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
So let's just go around the table really quickly. What is our relationship with the original film? And Chelsea, I'm going to throw it to you.
You're gonna call me out.
I'm throwing it to you first. Yeah, I just throw it to you.
I love this.
So I watched Gladiator on Tuesday, thinking
For the first time.
I didn't realize it was for the first time because Gladiator is just like one of those movies. It's like you know so much about it that you think you've seen it all, and I'm sitting here. It's
like Forrest Gump.
Yeah, like you know everything. Like, are you entertained? Like you know. So, but I'm sitting here and I'm like, I've never seen this, at least in like chronological order of the story or something. So yeah, so we watched it on Tuesday. And first time, loved it, great. We were sitting there, and I'm like, I'm hearing some very familiar score motifs here.
Like, notably Pirates of the Caribbean.
I recycled that like 3 years later, and I was like, "Huh, you got lazy."
I can tell you, it was specifically. There's a Prison Break sequence about 2/3 of the way through the movie, and it's like it's not even kind of vaguely. It's it's the Pirates of the Caribbean.
No, it is 100%.
Yeah.
It threw me.
Not
that was the first time I ever
what
noticed.
is going on?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, but it's one of those movies. I mean, like Lord of the Rings, kind of that. Like it holds up just so well because there's basically no like CGI in it, like at all. Which again, we'll talk about later. But yeah, no, it was amazing. Loved it. Great job. Good job, everybody.
Good job, Ridley.
Yeah,
you did that.
20 years later.
24 years ago, you did a great job. The Academy was onto something with those final Oscars. Okay, so I love that you bring this to the table, Chelsea. So she's newcomer, and she says it still holds up. So that's good news. Luke, What did you think? What's your relationship with the original film?
I have a weird relationship with it, I feel like. So it's one of those that, like, we talked about, like Forrest Gump or something. It's always on TV when you're growing up. And so I'd seen it bits and parts and pieces. And I remember not liking it, like, first probably 10 times I saw it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until the last couple years and the 3 more rewatches where I'm like, okay, maybe I like it. And then now I rewatched it, like, right before I went and watched Gladiator 2. And I'm like, okay, I do like it. Because for me, I always lump it in with, like, Braveheart, the Patriot, or whatever, some masculine guy saving whatever. And I'm just, I usually, like, zone out on this. But I don't know. For some reason, this one feels different than those. There's a little bit more heart to it. It's not, it's Russell Crowe. It's not Mel Gibson running around being like He-Man or whatever. And
that changes a lot. Those two different people swapping those out.
It does.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, like, completely different. So yeah, it's one that's grown on me over the time. I really love it now. Big fan of it. It holds up a lot for me. There's some stuff that doesn't hold up for me, specifically like fight scenes 2/3 the way through.
You can say it. We can spoil the first movie. 24 years. I think we're allowed to spoil it.
Yeah, but like up until like the last fight that he has, like the ultimate battle or whatever. But like, there's something that bothers me about early 2000s movies where you're shooting 23:9:8, 24, whatever, and then you slow that down. And
the editing is weird.
I can't stand it. And it has like, as much as I love Nolan, it has like the Christopher Nolan quick cuts. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on right now, but people are fighting each other, and I would feel a lot more invested in this if I could see what was going on.
Are you referring to the tiger fight specifically?
That too, but like specifically, so like the big battle at the beginning of the movie.
The slowdowns.
Slowdowns, and you're just like, all right, guys, like, come on. And what's crazy is later on in the movie, they slow something down too. I'm like, no, that looks properly slowed down. Mm-hmm. Why didn't you just do that earlier?
Right.
I don't know. That's just, as an editor, that stuff drives me nuts. And I know it's a choice and a decision, but for me, it's not my decision that I would make.
I noticed that on my recent rewatch as well, and it's one of those things, because the movie seems pretty timeless. Other than that, that's like the one thing. It's like, why did they slow that scene down? Why did they cut there? It's definitely a style choice to your point. And it's like, what were we? Were they on cocaine at the time? Like, what?
It's the movie's like one thing for me.
Yeah, that's same. Yep. Laron, how about you? What is your relationship with the original?
Okay, so all of you will probably be surprised by this as well. Like, I mean, I only saw this movie about 10 years ago for the first time in its entirety, but similar to Chelsea and Luke, like, it's something that has existed for so long.
It's on TV a lot.
I have seen certain scenes from it so many times, so you do feel like you've watched it. You do feel like you've watched it until you watch it and you realize, oh, this is actually really good. Mm-hmm. But again, it's been 10 years since I've seen it. I didn't get a chance to rewatch it ahead of this one. I wish I had, so I can see very closely how much of a difference, if there is any, between the first two. You did this, so I'll be curious to hear your thoughts. But I remember when it's one of those movies that I had a blind spot with, and there's several of those. And every year I do what 10 movies have I not seen that everyone has seen that it's ridiculous I haven't watched at this point? And I just sit down and watch those movies. I make a list of those every year.
That's smart.
So that's what I did 10 years ago for Gladiator. And so I remember putting it on there. Like, I get why people like this, especially at that point, I think, 14 years prior. So, so I mean, I think at that point, and I remember thinking to myself, like, is it going to age? Will it not be as rousing for me when I watch it? And I remember it being very effective in that way. So I was like, this makes sense. This makes sense why the Academy, gravitated towards this. I remember Roger Ebert, one of our favorite film critics, historically despised this movie.
Does not like the movie.
Does not like this movie, that it was completely overrated. Liked Russell Crowe, but did not at all.
It was also up against the other big one that year's Oscars that had the momentum was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is also a classic.
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of good movies came out of 2000. But yeah, so I think this is a really good swelling, but I don't have like this I don't know, what do you call, like a Rolodex of all of the scenes just placed in my mind as somebody who would have watched it multiple times coming into this. So I'm a fan, but a new fan, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, I totally. That's interesting. So I think it sounds like we all kind of have Chelsea being notwithstanding, but like, I mean, so I didn't watch this when it came out. So I didn't watch this until probably 07, 08. So I was rated R. I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of stuff.
It was Dad's movie.
It was a dad movie, but my dad.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Yes, it's a dad movie. Exactly. Yeah. So my now brother-in-law, who was dating my sister, they watched it when they were, it would have been like, oh wait, so I watched it with them, and that was the first time I saw it. It was also, I'm pretty sure, the last time I watched it start to finish. And it was there actually is an extended cut. I watched theatrical with them. And I just like you, I was like, I saw this part on TV and that part because it was on all the time. And at the time, I was like, oh, this movie's so rad, but it's because I'm allowed to watch this more adult movie, and it's like, oh, clearly the movie's got big ideas, and I was like, oh, it's so smart, so I was a little curious going back to revisit it. I was like, is this actually gonna hold up, or is it just one of those movies that's like, oh, it's cool because I thought it was cool because it was like my first touch point for, like, air quotes, more adult movies. And the answer is, I rewatched it just 1 week ago, about 4 days before we saw Gladiator II, and this thing holds up remarkably well. I think Luke's point, literally the only thing I really was annoyed by was a couple of editing choices, but and I guess the Pirates of the Caribbean score. it's an incredible score. That's why it also feels like out of nowhere. You're like, oh, okay,
where's Jack?
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's an epic. It's a slow burn. I did watch the extended cut this time around, which has a little more violence in it, a little more battle, and I guess there's some subplots that get a little more meat to the bone. And I thought it was borderline masterpiece. Yeah. I see why it holds up, and in fact, not to project our current time on it, but there was a couple of lines in particular. I was like, I know my headspace is in 2024, and it's not exactly the best moment to be in 2024. But there's a line, I should probably go find the line, but it's a line where the politicians are talking, and they're like, yeah, these people are starving, they're killing each other, and they're going to cheer them on for it. And it's like,
yikes.
I'm not going to give that movie, I'm not saying the whole movie is that cohesive and forward-thinking, but it is the thing where you're like, there's something about human nature that was true in Rome that resonated in 2000, but especially resonates in 2024. So kudos to the movie for holding up. Practical effects, man-to-man duels. Movies are cool,
and it has an emotional sweep to it. That's what I remember from it. I remember thinking, like, I'm not going to care about this. It's just a dude bro movie. They're just going to be men fighting, in the Coliseum, and it's just going to be battles nonstop. And I was like, yeah, that'd be cool for me when I was 14.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but today I need a little bit more substance. And it actually does have, like, that. That's what I and we'll talk about comparisons here in a moment. But that's what I think really resonated the most with me, was that, oh, this is actually a very stirring and moving movie. And it immortalized Russell Crowe as this, like, bona fide, like, movie star in that moment.
He gets to do so much movie star shit in that movie too.
Yeah.
Like, like just big
speechifying and just kind of, all that
iconic line dropping, and he's great. He's amazing in the film. Not much more to say about it than other than that. I do think it holds up. I bought the 4K that came out, and it looks fantastic. It sounds even better too. So highly recommend that. All right, let's get into our spoiler-free review of Gladiator II.
I remember that day. I never forgot it. That a slave could take revenge against an emperor.
Where were you born?
I don't know. I never knew a mother nor a father.
You will be my instrument.
Who are you?
Did you hear that crowd? The greatest temple Rome ever built. The Colosseum. Because this is what they believe in. Power.
So according to IMDb, Gladiator II is described as, after his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must look to his past to find the strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. Oh, I'm sorry. I must be mistaken. That looks like the same description as Gladiator 1. I don't know what's going on. That's weird. Okay. So this film, the sequel to Gladiator, has been in the works since June 2001. They have been trying so hard to get this movie made. It's been through multiple regimes. It was actually at DreamWorks. changed ownership hands to Paramount in 2006. Ridley Scott has said like 10 times, we got the script ready, and then they don't use that script. It's kind of comedic when you actually look into the production history there. This film, Gladiator II, is budgeted at roughly $250 million before marketing costs, which is not cheap. That's, Marvel budget there. I will say, we're recording this on Sunday morning, so I haven't been able to look at the latest. But when I put this together, it had a pretty solid Thursday night previews, bringing in $6.5 million domestically. And overseas, it's performing very well. In its first weekend, which again, all this information is going to be updated by the time you're listening, but it overperformed expectations overseas at $87 million globally before it opened here in the U.S. So all indicators say this is an expensive movie, but all indicators say it's going to be profitable. Now, is it going to be a mega hit? I don't know, but I think it's going to be a success overall.
Yeah, I agree. I hope so, at least.
Me too. Even though I have qualms with the movie, which we'll get to, but I'm like, I would love to see this movie make money.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
So Gladiator 2 stars Paul Mescal as Lucius, Connie Nielsen returning to the role of Lucilla, Denzel Washington as Macrinus, Pedro Pascal as General Acacius. I'm saying this name. Thank you. Correct me every time I say it wrong, which is most times. Joseph Quinn as Emperor Geta, Frank Heidinger, that's not how you say his name either, as Emperor Carcella. I'm bad with names. Anyway, the kid from White Lotus is one of the shitty twins. Okay, that's all you need to know.
Yeah, that's true.
And in terms of plot, the film is set 16 years after the death of Marcus Aurelius. That is, AKA, for people who did watch the original, Dumbledore in the first movie, who is killed by Joaquin Phoenix. So, all of that said, look, I'll start with you. What did you think of Gladiator 2?
I don't know. We're in a time right now that's so full of these like sequels of like movies that came out like in early 2009s or whatever, 80s and whatnot. And so it's so hard to sit here and see like a movie like this and be like excited for it just because you're like, oh, this is another cash grab. But then you hear it's been in the works for so long. And so you're like, all right, I'll give it a little bit of leanway there. But no, this movie as a whole, I enjoyed it. At multiple turns, it did kind of almost walk the path of the first one a little too closely. That was like, I was like, did we have to do this? But I mean, overall, I liked it. It's weird because I love Mescal in it. I think he does a good job, but at the same time, it's hard to compare when you're sitting there comparing this movie to the one that came before it, and just like the magnitude of early 2000s Russell Crowe. I think that's hard shoes to fill. And I think what's great about the first one, and we've talked about how we all have like these different relationships with it, but I think it wasn't until this movie and you hear them say like Maximus or talk about this gladiator from the past or whatever, you realize how attached you are to that character. And so for me, it almost like elevates the first one in a way of just being like, wow, I didn't realize how much I actually like am invested, have emotional attachment to that character until we actually like talk about him and all these other things. So no, I enjoyed it. I liked it. I do have a lot of problems with it just because of certain things. You guys brought up the CG. The CG, it was hard to see, some CG monkeys running around. And I was just like, man, I don't know. It's not, for me, that's not what Gladiator is. And I know it's hard. You can't get baboons or whatever to run around and actually do that.
Like,
so
when Dawn of the Planet of the Apes exists, monkeys should be looking a little better than that.
Well, I heard in an interview with Paul Mescal that apparently it was literally just dudes in green costumes acting like monkeys. I was like, what would have been? I mean, I know you're going for the monkey spectacle, so you can say we got monkeys, but I'm also like, what would have been cooler? Just dudes tackling him that weren't monkeys. I don't know. Would have been more visually engaging, probably.
Yeah. And these movies as well, you have to kind of throw away like historical accuracy because I know the first year the Coliseum was actually built was the only time they were actually able to flood it and have these naval battles. It was only until they did some renovations to the underneath of it that they couldn't do those anymore. And so, and you think of like the lifespan of the Coliseum where we at in these movies, I'm like, yeah, they wouldn't be able to have naval battles currently. But
if you remember the press tour from last year's Napoleon, you know that Ridley Scott does not really give two shits about actual history.
No, right. It's one of those things. I mean, that happened in the first movie as well, things like that. But you also kind of have to like, all right, because gladiators didn't also. There was no real killing that happened in the Coliseum. It was all more like WWE based type things, and so it's the movie's great. I like it. Not as good as the first. I think that's what I hear everybody say. I've read online, my first thing I do after seeing a movie is obviously I go to Reddit for validation. And so I read
who doesn't? Like one does.
read the
It's where the
discussion
truth
thread.
is told.
Exactly. And I'm like, I either feel worse about myself or better. But no, reading, there's other people that have problems that I was like, I don't really know about that. That might be digging for some problems. But I think you can say this is like a... where the first movie is a hard boil, this one's more of like a soft simmer.
Yeah, okay, that's a good way to put it. Chelsea Ratterman, what did you think of Gladiator?
I'm conflicted a little bit. I did like it, but having just watched the first one in such close proximity, I don't know how much of the praise for this movie is because it's a legacy title.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, again, you can't hold them up against Joaquin and Russell Crowe at all. I mean, the performances they were fine. I mean, the movie was great. Honestly, like as its own movie, I would probably give it a B, but as a follow up, it's a C.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's on its own. It is very much a movie of its time. The CG, there was some rough CG. I had some beef, not with the historical accuracy, but the fact we're using Greek mythology, not Roman mythology. But that's fine.
People don't know the actual Roman mythology. They know the Greek names.
Exactly.
Who's going to notice?
Yeah.
Yeah, they said something, and I was like, I think that's the other guy, the other name, the planet.
But no one knows that one's name.
No
The
one
Greek,
knows.
just the Greek version. I can see Ridley Scott and say, who cares a fuck about, just name it the Greeks.
That's
I
exactly
do.
what he said.
Yes, literally. But yeah, no, I mean, I'd watch it again for sure, but I don't know. It's not going to have a legacy like the first one did.
For sure. Okay. All right. Laron Chapman. What do you think?
At one point, Denzel Washington character, as he's about to enter the Coliseum, says to another character, I can't remember which one it is, but I will never remember all their names, but says, I'm just here for the games, and I feel like that's Ridley Scott's approach for this entire project, and that's both a pro and a con for this for me, because, like as Chelsea just said, it's like if you think of it as its own thing, it's actually pretty fun and just it goes down really easy. It's a long movie, but it does move along. I was never bored. Never got bored. Yep. It's not stodgy, as you mentioned. The first one is very much of a slow burn, but it also is more substantive. So
right.
I had a good time with this, and about halfway through, even as I was invested, as I was entertained, at about the halfway point, I started realizing that not a single scene had really hit me emotionally. I was just having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like everything is handsomely crafted. The performances are solid, strong. There's a couple that stand out a little bit more than others. I agree with you about Mescal, who I think is great as an actor. I think that this particular role doesn't have the same gravitas that Russell brought to it, and I think it needed that. Like I found myself more interested in subplots in this movie than I did
100%.
about his core story.
Well, yeah, because that's the part that's just we've
been
seen
here.
him.
We saw
that story before. Let's see the other stuff.
Exactly. The other stuff is more interesting. I was far more invested in the Lucia character and the inner politics that were going on with Denzel Washington. Those things were interesting, kind of in a conclave way, and the kind of that kitschier kind of campy, like, ooh, what's gonna happen next? Like, so this was a fun time. It does look good in many ways. You can see all of the money that was put on display outside of the CGI, but I mean, like the actual production design and the costuming.
And there's obviously bad CGI, but also like the opening battle, that there's a lot of boats and stuff. That looks magnificent.
Great.
It's a great sequence. And I think that, I mean, for the most part, this is a good time, but I agree. I just don't feel like this has the same soul as the other one. You know what I mean? This definitely feels more like are you not entertained? It feels just like entertainment and not so much like they're really trying to say anything new or different from what the first one said. So
I might disagree with you on that. Probably more spoiler conversation. Sure. I do think, we're going to compare it to the original here in a second, but I think this is a much more cynical movie than the first movie,
I agree with
which
that.
I actually... We'll talk about more spoilers, is for me as a feature, not a bug.
Okay.
I don't know if I would have said that 10 years ago, but that is what I will say today. And I think I agree with you guys. I think the spectacle here is super exciting. It's a super fun movie. Denzel Washington, you were saying none of the performances really are on the level. I would argue that's true for everyone except Denzel.
Except him.
And now, granted, he is doing something he doesn't do very often, which I enjoy, which is he kind of hams it up, but he hams it up by playing things very big Shakespeare in what are kind of really silly scenes. And that's what's the juxtaposition between this is kind of a silly scene, right? But with him showing up and just playing it so straight. There's one scene in particular where he like talks to a room full of senators. I was laughing so hard because it was so silly, but he was playing it so straight and so big. And so it was fun to see him get to do something different than what we know him as. He's usually playing things legitimately straight. He's trying to vibe with the scene. Here he's like, I am a charisma vortex. Frankly, I think the whole movie is his movie at the end of the day. So anything he is a part of was excellent.
This was a crazy movie for me with Denzel specifically. Like he is. This was a good performance by him, but there's other performances he's done that's been like really crazy good, even better than this. But this is, and I've always been a Denzel fan. Like I will always defend him, but like this was the first movie, and I don't know why it just clicked for me. And maybe it's just because everyone else's performances around him. But as soon as he opened his mouth for the first time, started talking, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like. This guy can act.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. I think it was maybe just compared with everyone else's performance. Not to say they were bad, but like everyone else was good.
No one was as good as him, though.
He was on a different level. And I think that was the first time I was like, oh, no, I get it.
It almost makes you wish that everyone was doing that kind of, because then it would really feel like this movie would have, it's like he is bringing something different to this movie, an energy that's different. And if they wanted this to be its own thing, if everyone was doing that kind of thing, then this would be a very unique movie in a different way.
Well, that's one of my criticisms of it is I feel like every actor's in a different movie. I feel like the only actors that are in the same movie are Denzel and the twins. Like they're all like big, loud, showy, silly performances. They're having a great time. And you've got Paul Mescal and Pedro Pascal, and even Connie Nielsen, who feel like they're in a very like Gladiator I style movie.
Yeah.
And this is not that movie. And so I was constantly drawn more to those performances. And it did lead for me a little bit of a disconnect. I will say, I feel like this movie leaves a lot of potential on the table because I think the last act is great. Anything that is different from the first movie is great. They set up, there's a really great setup with the Pedro Pascal versus Paul Mescal character that I feel like they just don't land that.
They don't.
The setup is so good. The setup is so Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Like you're like, oh, this is gonna be a big emotional confrontation, and they just don't.
No.
It fizzles out, and it bums me out because that's another thing that you're like, okay. So we're actually having a dialogue with the first movie by positioning Pedro as basically Maximus.
Yeah.
And, you have Lucius, who's a victim of his invasions.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And the movie just fizzles out really hard on
killed
me.
me.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I was like, that was for me, once that fizzled out, I was like, okay, I'm just here for a good time.
Yeah,
this movie
exactly.
clearly isn't really gonna like land emotionally. It's so just lean into the silliness, the fun, the big theatricality. But overall, long way of saying, I still really enjoyed it. I would call it an inessential, but yet nonetheless fun follow-up to the original. So it's really for fans of the first movie.
Your critique of everyone being on different rhythms, it seems to be a feature that we keep mentioning about Ridley Scott's films, because we said this about Gucci.
Yes,
we said
we
this
did.
about, like, why is everyone in 5 different movies in the same scene sometimes? And it's very jarring. It's like someone's going campy. You got Jared Leto, and then you got Gaga going for the Oscar, and then you got Jeremy Irons. Like, it's like everyone's like, it's like, God, is he not directing the actors? Is he just like, have fun?
I actually, based on the interviews, I think that's what it sounds like he's doing. He's like, you guys are the professionals.
Tired.
He's like, I'm focused on the visuals, the set, like, and you guys
you're
just
all
act.
stars. I paid you. You know what you're doing. Read the script. Do it.
Visual wise, I think the weird thing about these movies, I think, is I didn't realize how comforting like ancient Rome was for me, and to be like see that big wide like cityscape again. I was just like, oh yeah, we're
simpler
here.
times.
Yeah, I was like, I love this.
We are so back. Ancient Rome, movies about ancient Rome in 2024. See also Megalopolis. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. In terms of like, the actual fights in the gladiatorial arenas, though, what did you guys think of those? And I'll throw it to you first, Laron.
86, Ridley Scott can still direct the hell out of an action sequence. We got that. That's there. You know what I mean? Like, so we weren't we were very lukewarm on Napoleon, not like a movie that I want to rewatch, but there are a couple money battle sequences in that
best part of
particular
the
movie.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I can live. I'm this stodgy 3-hour movie, but man, those battle sequences were like chef's kiss. It's like, do I sit through all this for that? So
when those cannonballs
yes.
break the ice, you're just like, oh,
I
back.
feared this was going to be that. You know what I mean? And I will say, to this movie's credit, this movie is far more like just palatable and entertaining, and just you can get involved in it without, you kind of turn your brain off a little bit. It's not as deep and as methodical as it wants to think it is. But yeah, so I feel like the battle sequence it really kind of are the strength here. You know what I mean? Like, so like if you're going for that spectacle, it does service that, and this is what is done really well here.
Those are always the big milestones in these movies too. Is like there's always something really big involved around any of those set pieces within the arena, and so it's like with the boat one, you have something there, and then with the one where he has to later on in the movie, there's something important happening, and there's something there with that. And the one at the beginning, you have to stay alive, and then it's how you get Spot and all this other stuff.
There's a gimmick, and they don't emphasize it a ton, and they didn't in the first movie either. But they also are sort of like you said earlier, like the WWE. They are playing characters. So like when they're in the boats, they're like the Trojans versus the Greeks, things like that. Like there is a bit of theatricality. They don't really like pump up too much, but it's a nice subtle touch. Every battle's got kind of its own theme it's going for.
Mm-hmm. Fight scene wise, though, I think comparing Russell and Mescal, it was so interesting because you're encapsulated by Russell, one because he is who he is, but at the same time his character of Maximus is so refined and he's so good at what he does. Like they show that from the very beginning of the movie, the first movie, wherever he's captured and then he takes out all 3 or 4 of the guys by himself with his hands tied. In this movie, Mescal's character, he's fully capable of all these things, but he's a lot more raw, as where you're not seeing this like, oh, this is like, this guy's insane, he's really good at what he does, he's a killer, all these other things. I'm like, he's a little bit more, he's raw, and so there's room for those faults, and he might miss something, he might get like all that, and so it's a weird contrast, and I think that's what is so enticing about the Maximus character versus the Lucius character is like, I don't know, I have a thing for watching people who are like the best at what they do versus a guy who's like coming up, and it never really feels like he is like that guy.
Yeah.
I feel like he's kind of a wet blanket, honestly. That's kind of hard. That's really harsh, but like, he's just some dude who fights.
And I think it's the character. I just don't think
it's not Paul Mescal.
I don't think but I also, like you said, it's just he's really coattailing off of our love, as you mentioned, of Maximus, and that reverberates throughout this entire movie. And I'm glad that we have the first one, because I do feel like without that kind of built-in kind of emotional sweep that we did have from that, I don't think we would care at all about what's happening here.
Yeah.
So. In some ways, it gives it a little bit of an edge,
Also, I knew this going in because of the promo materials that Lucius was Maximus's bastard son, I guess. That is not at all clear in the first movie, by the way. Not remotely.
No.
It is like vaguely alluded that might be a thing that could be possible.
Connie's the only one that played that movie like she knew that that's what that was.
Yes, 100%.
For sure. So that's the only reason that got sold in this movie is because you're like, Connie knew. Lucilla, like, she was telling us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chelsea, what do you think of the battle sequences?
I think they were fun. They were entertaining. They were spectacle. But I think it comes back to this movie being a sign of its times. The battles in Gladiator 1, they were big, but they felt small because you were
intimate,
more intimate. And here they were big, but there was nothing to them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it did the disservice, especially in comparison.
You say nothing to them, you mean like emotionally there was nothing to them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they were just spectacle. That's all they were.
Yeah, I think there's like one battle in here, maybe 2, that I thought had some emotional weight to it. I don't want to spoil those, but I mean, like when Pedro Pascal shows up in the arena, I mean, that's not a spoiler, it's in the trailers, but like,
but I mean, that's not, I mean, there's the emotional weight there, but
it could have been a lot better, by the way.
Right.
For
sure. But I mean, at the end of it, it's not even like a battle, it's a fight. And then we have the end result being what it was. But in terms of the battles,
Yeah. Actual battle stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't have the weight. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I still think, even though it looked slick, I still think Pedro Pascal's best arena style duel is in Game of Thrones by like a considerable margin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have much more to add here. I did find all the CG to be somewhat deflating, but just the scope. I thought the last one was kind of fun too. I won't spoil why, but
Yeah.
you get all your characters in one place, and it's honestly that's where I'm like, this is silly. Like it almost feels like old, mustache twirling dudes laying the people you love on the train tracks. It kind of had that kind of again. So I appreciated all of that. It's kind of silly, not that great. But yeah, I think solid, less emotional though.
Yeah.
They could have done the emotionality way better. Okay. Do we think Denzel's really going to get an Oscar for this?
Oscar, no. An Oscar nomination.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Think it's the only thing that's going to get nominated from this movie? I guess maybe
No.
some cinematography.
I don't think it's getting picture. I think it'll get some text and some and I think performance wise, there's only one person nominated.
No doubt.
So. And I think it's worth it. I think, like you said, we've mentioned he's a standout. He's kind of in his own movie, but he's in the best version of it. So
It's almost like, what if they made the movie about him?
yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
They could have easily done it. I would have been.
I would have watched it.
Equally as interested.
Especially when you find out kind of what his motive is at the end of the movie. You're like, oh, that's a story.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting story that would still kind of like make you sort of like rethink the first movie in a meaningful way.
And he's so fascinating to watch because every time they cut to him and you look at his eyes and you just see the calculation is like, what is he thinking? Like, what's he doing?
Oh my gosh.
What's he doing? He's so good at that.
So much great eye acting in this movie.
I had no idea what was going on. Every time we do something, I was like, oh my God.
Which is weird because when he speaks sometimes he's so flamboyant, but you can see that that's also a performance.
There's other wheels turning.
There's other wheels, but when he's quiet, he is like, he's like, you know what I mean? Like he knows what he's doing. So, but I found it, and he was so unpredictable, and I love that he could still surprise us as an actor because we know he's like, oh, he's Denzel, he's gonna be great. But it's so interesting to see him do something that he's never really done before.
Every time he shows up, though, to Luke's point, I'm just like, God, he's so good.
He's so good.
Like, every time. It's like I take break. There's a couple years between movies with him. I didn't see Equalizer 3. So the last one I think I saw with him was that the Macbeth movie a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Shakespeare too.
I was
so
like,
he's
holy
bringing
shit, he's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's Denzel's playing this movie how these movies should be played.
Yeah.
I mean, because a movie set in ancient Greece, it's Shakespeare. It
Yeah.
is. I mean,
It's theatrical.
It's ancient tragedies, and he is playing it for that audience, and that's why movies like Clash of the Titans and them, as the swords and sandals genre, they don't work because these movies need to be treated like it was, a Plato or it needs to be played as a Greek tragedy or a Greek drama, and those other ones weren't. But Denzel was.
Yeah, he understood.
Nobody else was.
Yeah. I hope there's a real, I don't want him to win, but I do kind of hope he's like a real force during the competition. It'll be fun just to talk about this performance, through the award season. Well, let's get to letter grades, shall we? What letter grade would you give Gladiator II, Laron Chapman?
I'm going to agree with Chelsea here. I think as a sequel, this is a C movie. This is a kind of a mediocre movie. But I think that on its own, as a piece of entertainment, it's a B movie. So I'll give it a B minus. I'll split the difference there. I would put this on and rewatch it because it's fun. It is a fun movie to watch, but it will not have the same emotional grip that the first one had. I mean, even 10 years ago for the first time.
It's not a classic. The original Gladiator, that's a classic. Like, we can go back 24 years later and say, this is still pretty good. This movie, I feel like, might not have that same legacy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Chelsea?
I'm going to stand by what I said earlier. I mean, for the purpose of this particular question, it's a B.
It's a B?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but in comparison to the other one, it's a C.
It's a C. So is that a C plus or B minus overall?
I guess I'll give it a B minus if I have to average it out.
Yeah.
If you've got someone with an arrow or a bow and arrow pointed at you, crossbow pointed at you. Luke, what would you give Gladiator 2?
Nah, I'm with the consensus, and what everything comes back to is like you're watching a scene, you're like, oh, it's good, but it's not as good as this was, or it's not as good as that was, and it's I think having I don't like comparisons, but I'm like, it's hard not to.
Well, especially the thing that's frustrating is because I would say, it's a review, the first act of this movie is basically speed running the entire plot of the first movie. It's like, oh, it's that same thing, but it's all like way faster, way compressed.
Yeah.
And so it's like you don't want to compare it, but also the movie kind of demands you compare it.
It won't allow you to untether it.
Right.
They keep referencing it.
When they were going to
references
break
to
him out in the second act or whatever, I was like, we've seen this before.
When does the Pirates of the Caribbean score start?
We know how this goes.
So what's the letter grade?
B minus.
B minus. Okay. Well, that is a consensus because I'm also going to give it a B minus. We're on the same page.
Whoa.
It's good, not great. There's enough here that I love. Am I going to rewatch it? I'm going to rewatch at least the second half of it.
Yeah.
Because there's some. I don't know. The Denzel performance is so good. I think people should. I will say, if you are in it for the entertainment, the spectacle, I'd say see it on the big screen. Make a trip to the theater while it's there. The premium screens are probably gone by the time you're listening to this review because Moana 2 is now out. And but if you can see it in IMAX, Dolby, or whatever, I did not. I did see it on a very nice screen at Flicks Brewhouse, same screen as Chelsea, actually.
Yep.
Total accident. But if you can make it to one of those premium formats, I would highly recommend it because it sounds great. It's a great experience.
I would say, as Russell Crowe would say, you will be sufficiently entertained. You just won't maybe be moved by it.
I would say, if I was going to go on the Russell Crowe rating, I would say I was moderately entertained.
Sure. Fair enough.
Not overwhelmingly entertained.
Entertained enough.
Yeah. Okay, what else would we recommend either alongside or in place of Gladiator 2? It could be a television show, novel, music, video game, what have you. And Chelsea Ratterman, I'll start with you.
So I'm going to go with Pirates of the Caribbean.
The first movie?
Which one?
Yeah, which one?
So
It's an important question here.
It is an important question, and I'm going to say Dead Man's Chest.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I think
that's 2, right?
That's
yes,
the second
that
one.
is 2. Because
With Davy Jones with the squid face.
Yes.
Or the
Squid
octopus
face,
face.
yeah. But we really
that is the correct answer.
We really start going in that movie into the legacy with Will Turner and Bootstrap Bill. So I think it's a good comparison.
You know what's great about I reference it all the time the last time we sang it. Davy Jones in that movie that was released in 2006 looks better than the CG in this movie.
I was just thinking that,
yeah.
How is it possible?
It's like it's like we abandoned the craft for volume, but whatever. Luke, what would you recommend alongside this movie?
I'm not recommending this, but for some reason while I was watching this movie, I kept thinking of, was it the Henry Cavill movie, The Immortals?
The Immortals?
Yeah.
It is a fun movie.
Yeah, I don't know why I kept thinking about it, but my recommendation is actually a video game, and it is not Roman, but it is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, if you guys are familiar at all, but you have to play as a character and basically hop around the islands living in that time of gladiators and everything with the swords, the armor, the sandals and whatnot, and get to really immerse yourself in that time and what it was like and the culture and everything. I mean, there's a lot of historical inaccuracies, but
there's some here too, so it's fine.
Yeah, if you want to live within that in a game that takes, upwards of 100 hours to actually beat, then it was something I immediately wanted to re-download after watching Gladiator and Gladiator 2.
I've heard say from a lot of people that is the best Assassin's Creed game. Now, I think it's all about your flavor, because I also know a lot of people think the Valhalla, the Viking one's the best. So I've just come to terms with the fact that it's all about your preferred venue.
There's the Italian-based ones, the Ezio Story, the first 3, but then, Odyssey. Since those, Odyssey has been my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so tempted to play it. Got a new one set in Field Japan coming soon. Very excited. Laron Chapman, what would you recommend?
So I'm going to recommend 2 more Ridley Scott movies that I think are, one that I think is even better than the original Gladiator is Kingdom of Heaven. I'd say
Director's cut?
The director's cut, specifically notated director's cut. There is a
that
distinction.
That is an essential director's cut.
Typically, director's cuts, I give them or take them, whatever. I had a couple extra scenes. This one actually changes that movie for me. I think that is a stronger film than even Gladiator. And then also, most recently, one of his recent was The Last Duel. You and I both enjoyed that one quite a bit.
Not enough people saw it.
A movie I would have thought by a long shot. I was totally in for Gucci. I was like, I'm here to see of the 2 Ridley Scott movies releasing that year. I'm here for Gucci, and then Gucci disappointed me, and then The Last Duel surprisingly moved me. And I think it's the intimacy of that one, you know what I mean, that made me get emotionally swept up in it. So.
And the actual duel, I mean, frankly, I mean, again, we like the arena matches in this movie, but the duel in The Last Duel is like incredible.
Yeah. And I was surprised by how much of a feminist text that movie is. I mean, you think it's a bro movie, but it's really centered and anchored around what's the actress's name? She's in Jodie Comer. Yeah, she's so good, and it has a Rashomon like vibe to it, where it's like multiple different perspectives have a different take on the same incident that transpires, and each one is just a little bit different, and so the truth lies somewhere in between.
You also get an impressive goatee from Ben Affleck in the movie.
This is true. And the bleach blonde hair. It's a choice. It was a choice.
He should have gotten him an Oscar nomination for supporting. Come on.
But yeah, those would be my 2 recommendations.
All right. Both great. So Kingdom of Heaven, director's cut, underline the director's cut part, and then the last 2. I think those are both great recommendations. The one I went a different direction. I'm going to say, if you want to watch some really cool arena stuff, go watch the original chariot fight in Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur is one of those movies I think people who have an interest in history of film should watch it for sure. It is also an extremely long movie, and I know that the older I get, the less time we all have. So unless you really want to look at it as a historical text in the history of film, which I do think you should consider if you're a film scholar, fan, whatever. However, just go watch the chariot fight. It's pretty amazing, especially when you consider that they did that back in, what was it, the 50s? It's
very impressive.
Very, very impressive. Second, recent recommendation, you want to watch another arena fight? Fade Roth the Fight, Doom Part 2.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of the coolest modern arena fights I've ever seen.
Cool.
With the black and white like aesthetic because of the moon, and then you had those weird dudes in the costumes that felt like they were out of a Jodorowsky movie. I don't know what they were doing there, but they look cool. And lastly, The Running Man. We've got a remake of this coming, starring Glenn Powell. Let's go watch the original with Arnold Schwarzenegger if you want to look at dudes fighting in arenas. Come on. It's a great one. Check it out. All right. Well, that is our spoiler-free review of Gladiator 2. If you do not want to be spoiled on the film, go ahead and tune out now.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
All right, so guys, I got a couple things that I want to talk about with this film. We can go in any direction we need to, but I just want to start with something that really stuck out to me is this idea that the war, and I don't want to oversimplify, but let's say the war for good and evil, or the war for righteousness versus corruption, however you want to put it, it's never over. So, and the way we got me thinking this is the beginning of Gladiator 2. Firstly, you get like a really cool, like animated fast forward recap of the big scenes from the first movie. It was really stunning stuff. Yeah. Followed by some on-screen text that's basically like, yep, so that was a cool fight. Maximus won. Rome has, despite that, Rome has again fallen under the cruel rule of Emperors Caracalla and Geta. And it kind of had the wheels turning. It's almost like, it feels like the whole first movie might have been pointless, okay?
Because it's 16 years later.
It's 16 years later, yeah. There's a big time jump.
I would have preferred a bigger...
Honestly, in some ways.
There's been literally 8 more years more time since the first one passed, and the movie is still going back.
We've been 24 years removed it. Yeah. And then I start thinking about, okay, we've got this setup that feels so like, what was the point of the first film? There's a larger emphasis on politicking, especially with the Denzel character. Lucius is seeking vengeance on Pedro Pascal's character, who again is presented as sort of a stand-in as a Maximus type hero. And then the film's survivors the first film's survivors, the ones who did make it carry over, are dispatched in very cruel fashion in the movie. This is a more cynical movie, okay? And I guess when we're thinking through this setup and how this film plays out, what does this say about how the world, or at the very minimal, Scott's view on the world has changed since the original film was released 24 years ago? Laron?
So, as you mentioned, like we jump in time, and all we get is this kind of title card to kind of give us like the fill in the gaps. I feel like a more interesting movie would have been like where that breakdown happened. Like where did that change? How did we get to this space right now? And like I said, as you mentioned, it does seem like he's not engaging with that very much, so much as he's just reflecting what he probably has, his view of the world right now and how we become more cynical. These movies,
I think I would label Ridley Scott, by the way, as a misanthrope at this point. If you actually watch him in interviews and stuff, he doesn't like people.
No.
And you can see it in his movie back to Prometheus. He's like, yeah, people are stupid.
People are dumb. People are dumb. Exactly. Yeah. But it feels like the Maximus character, because because he kind of represents nobility, civility, and honor, and it feels like all of those virtues have kind of died along with him in the arena. We would thought that his death was going to change, everything, and it doesn't seem like it has.
Well, and the way the first film even ends, it's like it was a triumph. He's like, I got my vengeance. I fought for Marcus Aurelius's dream of Rome.
I got the honor of the people around me. They're rooting for me, that sort of thing.
And like it's funny how he's like, I'm bleeding out. The Senate is back in power, and this person's free, and now I'm dead. It's kind of funny how it goes, but I mean, like it's like all that. Like his last words basically rendered meaningless.
Meaningless now with this movie that just basically just disregards, that his message got across and that people took it to heart.
It's like the opening crawl to Star Wars: Last Jedi. Somehow Palpatine returned.
Sorry. Well, so I don't want to and actually, but I just want to distinguish this because one of those movies is very good and one's not. That is the Rise of Skywalker, not the Last Jedi.
Or the Rise of Skywalker. Yes.
Sorry. Continue.
I hate both movies, so that's okay.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Just a final thought is that it was there's kind of this growing nihilism that now is kind of manifested, and there's something that I found interesting about Denzel's character as he's speaking to Lucius, right? About how the rage you have is a gift, you know what I mean, and it's going to change. It's going to bring you victory and all these things, and that now that we know who his character is, we realize now that. And he used that to his advantage in many ways, but it seems like honestly, it's that empathy that he extends towards Pedro Pascal's character, where he starts finally falling into the original placement that his father had, and it seems like now it's like, oh, I've been blinded by my rage actually, and so my rage wasn't a gift. My rage was kind of the thing keeping me from following on with my father's legacy, and so it seems like. It matters who's in power. They set the temperament. You know what I mean? Like, and which is why we're like in our current world right now, we're thinking like, great, what's the next 4 years going to be like? And what are the 4 years after that going to be like because of what has now been poisoned into the universe? And so,
we noticed even in the movie, like during the gladiatorial arena matches, again, historical accuracy notwithstanding, because it's I'm sure not accurate, but like they had to have in this movie, they went out of their way to show that the people watching had to be under the control of soldiers, like they were under the threat of getting shot by a crossbow if it got violent. Yeah. So there's this like risk of violence that was not apparent in the first film that is present here.
Sure, sure,
yeah. Luke, what do you make about this sort of difference in terms of tone and vibe?
No, I'm very much on track with you as where everything seems like the whole movie. It's that weird feeling of being on edge.
Yeah.
Like the entire time, and not and for the civilians, for anybody, where anything could be the tipping point. And I mean, we keep bringing up like today's times, but I'm like, that's exactly how like you feel at certain times. Just like something's going to be that tipping point. Something like, what's the thing that's going to push us over the edge, and why am I so tense all the time?
Yeah,
it's like I mean, last 4 years we've gotten somewhat of a breather, but it's like at the same time, we're like, oh, that's what relief feels like, something. And for that movie, it's just it recreated kind of that tenseness within me, to where it's just like, man, these people are just like, and the twins the brothers, they bring it up. Are they twins?
I thought fraternal twins.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they bring it up earlier in the movie where like, hey, the people, there was a previous riot and the Praetorians or whatever fizzled that out. And I'm just like, God, this just seems so awful. And so no, I think I don't have much to add on to it, but I think I totally agree with the point that you made, that this seems very much what is going on. And we just we watched The Order and everything, and it's just it's crazy how many movies there are now to where you're just like, huh.
It's like the same narrative over and over again. It's like, so even as we're complaining about the world that we're living in now, it's not new or novel. This is just, it's the ebb and flow of human nature, power and corruption. It just keeps happening and manifesting in different ways.
Yeah.
So.
And I would understand, again, I'm not a historian, but I imagine what I understand about Rome is it was also constantly in a state of how long's the Republic going to last before it's ultimately overthrown? And even then, once it's overthrown, it's like, how long before people start turning on each other or start turning on the emperor? Like it was a very complicated history. Not unlike in some ways what we've been dealing with in America for at least the last 50 years. Chelsea, what did you make of this sort of difference?
I think that the difference, at least for me, in terms of Ridley looking at using these as a lens to look at today, I think that Ridley's Ridley's opinion changed in that he no longer thinks that the people can save themselves.
Yeah.
Because we had Maximus died to, bring the dream of Rome to life and give it back to the people, but he died trusting that the people could do it. And now Ridley's like, the people can't do it. They have to have somebody that is going to move them.
Guide them, yeah.
Yeah. So, and
because otherwise you just end up with another version of the same shitty leader.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's accurate and astute. Sort of my read. It's all in line with what you guys have already said. I think if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have kind of hated that they opened the movie this way, especially without sort of elaborating on okay, so what went wrong with the plan that they had? And again, there was with understanding that we were probably never going to get a sequel. If I assume that was the only movie we would have gotten, you would assume, okay, Rome is saved. Well, today, 10 years later, though, 2024, I think I appreciate this as a feature. It's just because it's more believable. It's more realistic. It's how power and politics work. It's an ebb and flow. It's a pendulum. You can have a small, memorable victory that in some ways maybe even makes you feel like you've won the war. But actually, the next big fight is going to happen. And it might happen without you. There's no, progress is not a straight line. And again, a younger me would have been like, well, no, that's the whole reason these characters fought and died was to protect this ideal for a better Rome. But, good, however you want to frame it, I don't think good and evil is too binary, but let's just say for the people who are fighting for the people versus the people who are fighting for power, that sort of triumph is not a task you check off a list. It is a never-ending process that continues, and we cycle through different iterations of it over and over again throughout human history, not even just American history.
You progress, you regress, you progress a little more. It's back and forth.
It's deeply depressing and upsetting, and it makes you wonder what's wrong with us as a species. But I think him doing that in this movie though is really telling, and I appreciate the realism there because the world we live in, it's not like, again, you can't win one election and it's over. It's you gotta wake up the next day and do the work. Everyone's got to pitch in to do the work. So otherwise, you get characters like Denzel Washington's Macronus, who shows up as a bit of a opportunist to sort of exploit the system. So I want to move on next to talk about Denzel Washington's character. He has a very unique form of villainy. How does this feel relevant, do you think, to today's, especially when we think about like power, politics, government? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. His character's interesting because we just thought it was going to be a rehash of the character from the beginning that owns Maximus and everything, and it was like, he's going to be a father figure to Lucius or whatever. But at the same time, he is the one that is willing to like play his car ride, do these ridiculous things, whatever, to get to the top. And I think maybe it's just me being an adult now, and this has always been, but like you see people like that in local politics, stateside and everything, that are they're just doing these things because there's an end game for them to get. They're not doing it just because like, I don't know. I don't feel like they're just doing it just because, but there's an end game to get somewhere else.
Right. It's not necessarily about the job. It's how can this job I'm doing or this opportunity I'm taking actually springboard me to a bigger, different thing.
Right. And like I said, I don't know if it's just now because I'm more aware of things in the world or how the world works, or maybe these things are being just shouted at me now. But it feels very much like I can see comparisons between that and then people on the lower end of politics doing these outlandish, crazy things to get to the top and then finally get there, whatever.
Has there been a city council meeting recently where some dude showed up with the head of the mayor and just sticks it on the table?
Not yet. It's coming.
Sir, that's a felony.
That sounds dark. Okay, but I wanted to break the tension there because that scene where he shows up with the head was so funny because it's so silly.
Yes.
It's so silly, and he plays it straight. He's like, turn the head every which way.
It was very Game of Thronesy.
Very. It was really funny. Laron, what's your take on this form of villainy played by Denzel?
Yeah, it just seems like winning is the point at any cost. Say what you need to say, and it's interesting how he kind of reveals how impressionable people are and how much ahead of ahead of their psychology as you will of many like specifically the twins, who are never really fleshed out very well, I don't think. But we know that they have kind of like one default like and one default attribute. But I feel like Denzel he's a brilliant foe because he's charismatic. He's able to be in the important rooms with the conversations. He's able to extract the information he needs to manipulate and pit people against each other, all for his own gain. And that is absolutely how politics works. I don't think half of the people, I keep bringing it back to the current state, but it's the world we're living in. So let's discuss it. It feels like, like even with the song and dance of how politics work, it's like, I don't think a lot of people in the current election believed some of the things they were saying. They just knew that if we say it, enough people will believe it, and it will get me to my end goal. Will we do all these horrible things? We'll see, but
or we say it and we won't do it.
We won't do it.
In fact, we're going to do the opposite of the thing we're saying we're going to do, but we know that you to hear it.
Exactly. And so it seems like he knows how to play that game. He knows how to play that game, say whatever you need to do to win. That is the point. It's not about being noble. It's not about being, self-righteous. It's not about doing the right thing. It's about getting to where you need to be to have the power you need. So,
well, and I think what's interesting about him too is, again, I go back to that scene with the head, and that seems silly and funny. But what sticks out to me is that he takes advantage of chaos. Like everyone, the Senate is just in such shock that just happened, and no one wants to say anything.
Yeah.
So then he just starts talking, and then he has one guy who he actually has paid off. He's like, yeah. And that's all it takes to get the rest of the Senate to fall in line. Is like, we don't know what to do. This guy's got an idea. Maybe we should just listen to him.
Everyone's too afraid to lead. They need someone to tell them what to do. And that's why, again, who is in charge matters. But if you're the one has the confidence to stand up and say, well, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll say it. They'll follow you, but hopefully you have the right intentions. He does not. So,
well, his intentions is the other thing. And Chelsea, I want to get you to weigh in on this too. But I mean, the intentions with him are interesting because his little spiel we get at the end is, I was a slave of Marcus Aurelius. So I am my entire mission is to undo his dream. I want to kill his dream.
Yeah.
It was never real. That is my mission. I want to ideologically destroy the idea of a better Rome that gives power to the people. Again, really way more powerful than I expected. I wasn't taking that character that seriously to think that he was going to have like such a powerful intrinsic motive.
Yeah.
Chelsea, what did you think of Denzel in this film?
I think that Denzel, if you just on the odd chance you listen to this, I'm so sorry. Denzel is Trump, is who he is in this movie. He is the victim of the system that he has decided he's going to stand on the ashes of. And I think that is what separates this movie from the first one. Is the first one is so much about dealing with, Maximus's deposing the emperor, essentially is what he's going for. It's that 1%, it's that top thing. But this movie now introduces us as the people and how we are so willing to tear ourselves apart that somebody like Denzel, like Macronus or like Trump is able to do what he did.
Exploit us, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, he at no point cares about. In fact, he actively is banking on Rome to destroy itself at the end of the movie. I mean, he's like literally like, I just lit the fuse and I'm going to get the heck out of Dodge.
Yep.
I will say, and that's why I also want to get your read on the ending here, because I've seen some people complain about it. I don't necessarily agree with this criticism, but there's some people who are like, well, there's two armies just standing there like while these two dudes duke it out in the middle. And I understand the sentiment, but the reality is, I think the point the movie's trying to communicate is, even though Macronus has done these things, he has no real loyalty of the people. It's like he called the shots, but whenever rubber meets the road, do people actually want to risk their lives for him? And obviously we see Paul Mescal cut his hands off and mutilates him. Pretty cool fight. Both of them, yeah. What did you guys think of what was your read on the ending?
Hyper unrealistic for me, but
probably pretty unrealistic.
I just feel like the tension was too high in that moment. Some kind of brawl would have ensued, even if it was quickly disposed of. But I get it from like a thematic point. Okay, like the noble one won. Now, hopefully, like the end of the last one, people will learn their lesson this time. Truly, this time they're going to get it right. Well, don't know. We'll see in Gladiator. We'll see. We got to read the title card in Gladiator 3 to see whether they listened to him this time or whether they went back to their own things. And that's. But the I guess the chief difference here, though, between those two is that Lucius didn't die. So he is there to continue that space. Is there a unseen force that wants to undercut him, in that way, undercut this vision? Like, how many people was Denzel able to corrupt in that brief ascent to power, so.
Well, how many people were actually loyal to him?
How many people are loyal to that cause,
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the good senators were killed in that the final Colosseum part.
It's true.
It was who's left?
Like
that's
anyone who opposed him. Yeah, that's right. Well, we didn't even talk about that. I found that to be comedically silly, but it was also so funny and so cool. But also Connie Nielsen, holy shit.
Yeah.
Just shot. And then what's his name from the first movie?
Yes.
Just basically didn't even get a cutaway death. Just pop.
Oh, I know. I was like, that came out of nowhere.
Seriously. Was
Death be coming.
That was actually probably one of my favorite sequences because there was the least amount of CGI, and I liked the chaos from it.
Yeah.
But anyone who was opposing his rule were rounded up and put in the arena for spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it makes me wonder about is that like where we're at today, but with social media? I mean, it's not people in an actual arena, but in terms of people getting dogged on social media channels for I don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
Something there.
Not X.
No,
Not there.
not the town square.
I think the thing that's tough for me about this ending is I think that my most generous read on it is Marcus Aurelius' dream is dead, but that doesn't mean it's too late to build a new one that is still putting the same principles first.
Which I think is the whole point, right? Of us living in this space is let's do the most good we can, sustain it as long as we can. If it falls apart, let's start again. Like ants, you just keep rebuilding. Right. You kick the ant hill over and then hopefully, hopefully one day we finish our tasks.
But also, again, never-ending pendulum.
But also, we probably never will. So,
no, so that's why it does feel. I don't say it rings false. I think in theory I like it, but again, the rest of the movie is so cynical. For this movie to have a triumphant ending feels kind of out of place in my mind.
Well, this movie doesn't end so these types of movies I brought up earlier, like the Bravehearts, Patriots, the first Gladiator. There's always a person that you're coming after. The first movie, it's Joaquin's character, or whatever. That is the ultimate battle, and it's a sword to sword, whatever. And in this movie, it feels like you're more. They are in the first movie as well, but in this one specifically, it's more fighting more of an idea. It's where sure, he gets to the end with Denzel, but it's not that big moment like whenever Russell Crowe does face down Joaquin Phoenix in the arena. This is more of just I don't trust Denzel's character as a guy that's great with swords, but it was a little bit lackluster. But at the same time, I'm you can't rehash it, but we've already rehashed, and then we're killing the idea of that we've killed the bad people in power, taking out the next one in charge, and then we're.
But see, that's a more compelling ending. Is you killed Denzel, but the damage he did on the psyche or ideology of Rome, trying to make Rome turn on itself, making people believe that Rome is a lie. That's a pretty powerful ending, right?
Yeah.
The people, and there's actually people who believe that. Thus, it kind of fits in line with the rest of the movie. That's not the ending we got, though. They're no. It's just if you kill him, it's over.
No, exactly. 'Cause we lose the character who we had our sights set on from the beginning of the movie. Pedro, lose him halfway through, and then after that, you kind of lose. I feel
that was the emotional weight for me.
I feel a little bit lost now. I know what we have to do. I don't feel attachment. This is the person. I wasn't the twins or whatever were crazy, but I wasn't I didn't. They were incompetent.
Yeah. They were impish and just.
It was pretty cool when Denzel showed up and.
Let me help you carve that turkey.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving. Anything else we want to say on the ending before we hit our last topic today? No? All right. Well, real quick, and I don't want to rehash this conversation we've had on this podcast too many times, but I think with this one, it's an interesting case of this Lego sequel, reboot, long-awaited sequel sort of thing. I called this, when I was trying to explain what this movie is to people, I was like, it's Gladiator, The Force Awakens. It's basically just the first movie? It's that with different characters. There's a little remixing, but it's basically the same movie.
It's definitely gayer. I'll also say
Oh,
that too.
yeah.
There's a lot more. That's like, okay, all right, cool. This was not present in the first one at all.
No. We were not ready for that in 2000, unfortunately. So, this is the same movie. I think there is more palace intrigue, as I like to call it. The politicking in this movie, especially in the last act, it's fundamentally different. What do you guys think about this playing the hits approach to reboots or sequels like Gladiator II? And Laron, not to repeat the Alien, the Alien Romulus review, but it's like there's so many times where you're like, how many times can we quote that thing
exactly
before you're just tired?
You're like, this is not. It needs to be its own thing, and I feel like if all you're gonna do is play the hits, then this movie just will depreciate over time. It won't have value because it won't. You know what I mean? It's not. It signifies nothing, or just what we've already seen. So I just feel like it. Yeah, I don't.
Shadows and Dust.
I think if you're gonna make a sequel, I don't care if you're paying homage to the other one. That's fine, but find a way to say something that makes this stand on its own feet. Because, like you said, all the references, some of the direct references, the line references, the literal recap visuals of certain moments in the same, just feel like, okay, we saw that movie. It's already in my head. The reference is there by you doing this scene again. I don't also need to see the scene. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so, yeah, I'm not a fan of it. If the question is what my approach to this is, I wish that we would find more creative ways to pay homage without. There's no subtext. It's just text now. So
yeah. Chelsea, what do you think? As a person who just watched these very close together.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and obviously the opinion on this movie would be completely different if it came out in 01, 02, 03, like apparently it was originally intentioned. And now Ridley says he's already got part of a script for 3.
Whoa.
So yeah. I think
we'll see.
I think it's something about the afterlife. I don't know. Who knows?
He's 86. No.
Yeah. He's got time. Yeah.
He's cranking them out pretty fast though.
Oh, he is.
It's true.
Yes. But I think the only time really when you should be using something like Gladiator and you're gonna like use it again is you have to say something different, because a movie like Gladiator, when you use it again like 20 years later, you can use it as a mirror to show how we've changed, how we've progressed. But if you're not, then why are you making it?
Yeah.
See, this movie almost does. That's the thing. It almost does that. That's what's so frustrating. It's like you can see it, but then it doesn't come down with a thing to say.
Yeah.
What do you think, Luke?
I don't love it, and just the hit stuff. We've said it. It's like we've seen it before. Just like give me something new, give me something new. Sure, we can do we can have Gladiator too, but maybe the Gladiator is someone that was in the Roman army. He starts to question his ideals, and someone catches onto it. They throw him in the Gladiator pit, and then he has to fight his way out. I don't know. I haven't written that movie yet, but no, and so I'm the king of like, I want to see something different. Like I'm just so tired of and that's what like one of my favorite genres is horror, and that's because I can see a lot of different things all the time. Like I'm like, give me a new monster design, like I'm in. It's whenever stuff gets rehashed is where I get bored, I check out, and then like it doesn't. I think what Chelsea said is like it doesn't carry the same weight just because I'm like, this is so similar. Like like I'm not gonna sit here. If you give me a choice, you're like, hey, let's watch like a Gladiator movie. I'm like, oh, we're gonna watch one.
Yeah,
like we're gonna pick that. It's
no
only
question.
it's only for someone's like, hey, let's do a double feature. I'm like, okay, we'll watch both.
And that's exactly how anytime someone's like, The Force Awakens is pretty good. I was like, yeah, but if you said I want to watch one Star Wars movie and you gave me those two options, I would say, well, the first one, obviously, like it's because it's the same movie.
Yeah. Star Wars keeps coming back in my mind as we talk about stuff that's been rehashed, because that's what the sequel trilogy was.
Yeah,
and it's disheartening at the same time, just because you're sitting here and you're like, we spent all this time working on this, and all we could do is like rehash the same ideas.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It to me is someone who thrives on creativity and being able to create like different things. Like I get so tired, like in my work as a video editor, shooter, and everything. I get so tired of doing the same things.
Yeah,
the same interview setups, same this, same that, and it drives me nuts. And so,
do you as an editor ever have I don't know, director, whoever's technically over the project, walk up to you and be like, "Remember that cool thing you did in that one video that made a lot of money? If you just did that here."
I mean, yeah, and unfortunately, that's how things work.
Yeah,
it's like, hey, do that, and I was like, we
did that,
and it doesn't really work for this.
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, I can use it as being like taking the easy way out. It's
Sure.
like, oh, this video is only going to be put on whatever. And so I'll just, do what I did last time.
No, I feel you. I work in. I also work in marketing, so there's a lot of that. That thing that people know or they like. Just do that. And you're like, well, creatively not super interesting, not new. I just mentioned that because I feel like that's probably what a lot of people in Hollywood are constantly feeling like. People who are trying to bring these new ideas forward are probably constantly getting notes from executives. They're like, yeah, but when does he say the entertain line? Which, thank God, they did not repeat in this movie. They repeated a lot of lines from the first movie. I was like, do not stomp on shadows and dust, and do not stomp on, are you
having a good time?
Aren't you having fun?
Don't give me a Romulus moment. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't repeat what's being said. I hope, here's the thing I keep going back to with every time we talk about these legacy sequels or whatever. And it almost never works out. But if Gladiator 2 is what we need to get Gladiator 3, that is a big, bold, fresh new take on it, I'm there for it. There are examples of that. I think the Creed trilogy is one of the very few where it's like, okay, we remixed the first movie, which, by the way, Creed 1, amazing. I think better than the original Rocky in a lot of ways. But that you finally get a complete trilogy with that movie that is not reliant upon the old movies.
It's in its on the same universe, but it has its own story, its own world.
2 is not. I mean, the second Creed, it rhymes with 4 a little bit. There's homages, but it's telling its own story. 3 in particular is definitely telling its own story.
Love 3.
No, it's incredible. So I just, if this is what we need to get Creed 3, then I will take it. And that, I said that, but here's the thing. I said the same thing about Star Wars: The Force Awakens, and sounds like
you got that one.
I got The Last Jedi, but then we also got the Rise of Skywalker, which kind of renders the entire trilogy feel like a total waste of time and money. It's studios. The legacy sequel idea was so cool when it felt like the passing of the baton, but the reality is most of these transitions don't actually work. They keep going back to the well. So,
which I hope is not our enduring legacy as we move on. We're going to be in our 80s, like Ridley Scott one day. We look back and like, remember the movies from our time? Oh yeah, they just did the same movies from their time, and but lesser versions of them. You don't want that to be the case. Like, who were the people that went this way? Who went left when we went right? You know what I mean? Like, those are the things that are going to matter the most to people. I feel like personally, at least for me. But
and I wonder about like younger people. God, now I am old. Younger people.
Young crowd.
Oh God. But I do wonder about kids who are growing up and they come out and they have all these sequels that exist and it's newer, and I'm just like, do you guys understand the movies weren't always this way? There was a period where there was original ideas. It wasn't all IP oriented.
There was a point when The Matrix was an original idea, and then it became, all these different. Now we have all these carbon copies of those things that exist. So like, where's the root of anything? So
yeah. Well, I think it's just getting too easy for studios to do this, to be like, oh, well, we know what makes money. Because like at the end of the day, that's what it feels like it comes down to. Excluding like a handful of directors that are like, I'm
not tourism.
You're going there for that director. You're not going for whatever just because it's sequel. But I think it's just gotten easy. You see it with Disney, whatever. Hey, we have this old, really popular animated movie. Let's make a live action version of it.
Right.
I mean, have you guys seen the trailer for the live action dragon one? How to Train Your Dragon. I'm like, that's like a shot for shot, like,
it's gross.
But it's the original
remake.
The original director for the animated is the one making it though, because he said the studio wanted to make it, and he said, well, if we're making it, I'm making it.
I mean, I appreciate that sentiment that he has that sort of commitment, but I'm also, listen guys, I'm very depressed about this side tangent. I saw Wicked yesterday. We're going to talk about that next week, but the previews before Wicked as follows. The only one that was sort of original, the Mufasa movie, which is technically new material based on existing IP. The Snow White live action version, what the hell? And then the How to Train Your Dragon. Those were the first three trailers. There was not a single new thing in the trailers
all
before Wicked.
You've seen.
Yeah, all of them.
And I've seen the better version, most likely.
Exactly.
Yes.
Almost certainly.
Very sad.
Very sad. Anyway, on that note, it feels like a very Ridley Scott way to end this podcast. Any other
Cynicism, it's the point.
listen, guys, movies are great. We're gonna talk about Nosferatu in a month. I just keep holding my breath. Nosferatu,
We're holding out for you, Eggers.
after we,
Do not disappoint us.
after I have to talk about Moana 2 and the Lord of the Rings anime, both of which I'm excited about, but both are it's IP. Kind of bummed that's how it is. But okay, any other thoughts on Gladiator 2? Anybody?
No, I feel good.
You feel good?
No.
We feel satisfied. We feel moderately entertained
Yes.
on this podcast. All right. Well, hey, Luke, Chelsea, thank you guys for settling this beef here. We beefed it out by all agreeing on a B-.
Yes, we did.
So what a beef.
I'm more of a duke it out in a parking lot kind of guy, but this is a nice
This'll do.
replacement. Yeah.
Well, I know you guys both have your podcast, but I'll turn to you first, Luke, if you want to plug your podcast, but also your channels. Where can people follow you online?
So I don't. I've deactivated my current my personal Instagram, so you can find me. I run an Instagram that's completely about retro video games, Game Boys, everything. So it's called Anxious Arcade, and that's about it. That's all you can find me.
Anxious Arcades. I actually don't follow that. I'll check it out. Chelsea Ratterman?
You can find me everywhere under Cinephile Chels, Instagram, regrettably still X. Yep.
Listen, you got a following. If you have a following,
I don't. I just can't give it up.
Laron, do you know how sad it was? Like I spent 10 years and I finally had broken 1,000 followers, and then the bots took over. And you're like,
Here's
but
the
then
thing.
I saw so many people who had done that and built like followings of like 50,000 people,
Mhm.
and they were deleting it. And I was like, if they can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah.
yeah. And here's the thing: if all those people purge, then you're not talking to anybody but fake people or people you will otherwise wouldn't want to. So you did the right thing.
But also, Chelsea, Blue Sky is great. I got on Blue Sky. It feels like Twitter from 15 years ago. And that I know people are saying that, but I'm dead serious. Like, there's even a way you can look at stuff chronologically.
Oh my gosh.
They have like one where it's Discover mode, where you get the algo version, and then you get just your timeline. And it's like, and the conversations are not toxic. They're just fun.
Mm-hmm.
You might have convinced me.
Blue Sky.
Find me on Blue Sky. Luke A. Parish.
Okay, and where can people find Two Dudes in a Movie podcast?
Oh my gosh. If you want to listen to us, we are literally everywhere, it feels like. There's even podcast hosting things in India, wherever, China. We just popped off in Japan recently.
Let's
so
go.
that was
That's
cool.
really fun.
But no, Two Dudes in a Movie on wherever you get your podcasts. We mainly use our Instagram. We're currently we're in the talks to do some branding stuff. So there's probably gonna be some changes in the coming months. So don't get too attached to what you see. But Two Dudes in a Movie, Instagram. Check us out there.
I'm excited to see the upcoming developments in the pipeline. Yeah.
We are too.
So are we. Laron Chapman, where can people find you online?
Outside of just the basic Facebook, Instagram, just under my name, you can follow me, my review column, which I'm going to keep pushing, Real Insights with Laron Chapman on the cinematropolis.com.
Laron had some good ones out this week, guys. He did one on Conclave, and he did, what was it? The other one was on
See No Evil.
See No Evil, yeah.
And how
the remake.
How it actually doesn't suck.
Surprisingly, like
An
I'm
American
shocked.
remake that doesn't suck.
And I don't know if it's better, but as we talked about, I'm like, I actually am very excited to show it to my significant other because I think she'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
She would not enjoy
The other one
not
at all. No.
All right, well, you can find me on all things Seamaster Talk. That's letter Seamasters Talk. Letterboxd, of course, for quick little bite-sized reviews, but really the cinematropolis.com is the best place to find me. Keep up all the stuff we're doing over there. Got Mr. Daniel Bokemper talking about Anora and writing about Sean Baker. Got Laron writing about all the upcoming film, a lot of great films, maybe something on Nickel Boys soon. So yeah, it's an exciting time over at the Cinematropolis. And we're going to take that break after we wrap up our top 5 of the year, and maybe some cool stuff coming out next year. Real excited about all the cool things happening there. Well, listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Catch you again next time. We return next week to complete the Glicked double feature with our review of Wicked.
See, he did it.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here
It
for.
worked.
Glicked.
And
Glicked.
if you're listening to this on day one drop, have a happy Thanksgiving. Until next time.